top hats and button shoes, erotic tintas, midnight cruise, Berlin Gay Society in 1903. Sigmund Freud's Vienna's hype identifies the homotype, the intermediate sex, and heterodoxy. The gay wave moves across the sea. Hello, there is liberty. Betty Boop is hot and Hooch is out in the cold. Greenwich Village, Bloomsbury, gays in high society. Autumn night, Chicago fights, Leopold and Lowell. Pride, gotta have pride. Better run too long to keep it inside. Pride, gets it back and watch from the side. Pride is power and power is pride. It's time to celebrate all the colors of the rainbow. Get out into the streets, follow the tide.
This is Stonewall Portraits, Profiles in Pride, our attempt to briefly capture in an oral history the stories of some of the people who have made our lives easier as gay men, lesbian women, bisexual and transgender people, and heterosexuals too. And our really special guest today is Urvashi Vaid, one of who I said actually in front of an audience not also long ago was and always will be a prophet in our movement. And I don't mean a prophet who foresees the future. I talk about somebody who keeps us focused on where we're going and with a good, strong, clear voice. So let me say a few things about you that I know, and just to fill in before we start talking. You were born in New Delhi, India, on October 8th, 1958. So you are 10 years younger than me. And your family brought you to the U.S. when you were 8 years old. You immediately embarked on a career of justice as age 11, protesting the war in Vietnam. I want to find out how you did that. And then you went from that to giving one of the most talked about and memorable and most quoted speeches by a gay person ever, when you addressed the large audience of gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and allies at the 1993 March on Washington. And the words of that speech are really sort of the prophetic call to action of what we're all, which I'm going to actually ask you to share as a treat right now in a minute. So you went to Vassar, and you got your law degree at Northeastern.
Yep.
And then you embarked on this extraordinary career. You and I met back in the early 1980s when you were a staff reporter for Gay Community News. And
I was a volunteer, really.
Well,
everybody was a volunteer.
Everyone was a volunteer, but you were part of the editorial board that gave it incredible direction. After spending time in Boston, you ended up becoming the media director for the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force. Was it lesbian at that time or just National Gay?
When I started,
which
I
was
don't even remember. I think it was in like 1985 that the organization changed its name. So by the time I was there, it was GNL.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and then you became its executive director, and then you took a break to write your book.
Virtual Equality.
Virtual Equality. What's the subtitle of it?
The mainstreaming of gay and lesbian liberation.
Okay, so I want to talk with you about that, to your philosophy of mainstreaming. And then you went from there to the Ford Foundation, where you headed up a portfolio on charitable giving, right? And then you went from there to the Arcus Foundation, which is a gay-oriented and climate. The sponsor of it is also interested in apes, but it was that in gay, and you were the executive director of that. And you have recently decided to take a little time off before you take on a new hat. Are you going to write another book?
Yeah.
Good for you. Good for you. But I wanted to say that I, in researching you, just briefly, if one just knew your name and your birth date, one could tell exactly where you were going, right? Because Urvashi is the primal siren in Hindu, right? In Hindu religion, she is perpetually youthful, beautiful, but evasive.
You've done your mythology research.
I did. Vaid is a name that comes from Punjab area of India, and it's traditionally medical. People who are healthcare, people who care about people's health. Was your dad a doctor?
No.
Anybody in your family?
No.
No?
Actually, my aunt is.
Yeah.
But we were all, my father and mother are both the first in their generation to put themselves through college and get an education. So they're both, my dad's an academic. He's an English professor and a writer. Okay. They're both artists, actually. He writes novels and short stories, and he's a very renowned Hindi writer and very experimental and brave in his writing. And my mother is a poet and a painter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And before I go there, I just want to say October 8th makes you a Libran.
Yes.
Right? It's the only sign of the zodiac that is inanimate. It's the scale of justice. Also on October 8th, not that day, but not that year, but Dennis Kucinich and Jesse Jackson were born same day. So you have an innate
idealists.
Well, you are an innate fighter for justice, and one would know that just from your name and your birth date. And so this is what your life has been.
Well, Brian, you should go into diagnosing people.
No. Well, I just wanting
it's a version of numerology.
I'm just wanting to do this for our listening audience. I think did you grow up Hindu?
Yeah.
And even when your folks brought you to the States, were they
Sure. Yeah, my mother is much more observant than my father, and Hinduism is one of those cultural religions. It's a way of you live,
right.
Not just like a book or
right.
a set of practices.
Dogmas, right?
Yeah, and so it was. I would say I'm a pretty bad Hindu or a mediocre Hindu because Hinduism is. The context in which I grew up was a little town in upstate New York called Potsdam, New York, where my dad taught at the State University of New York. He taught English and writing. And so I went to Potsdam High School, and it's like a town of 10,000 people, and with a small Indian community. So we did
So you grew up in a small Indian community?
It had a small community of students and professors mostly. And there was a little India Association of Potsdam. Yeah. Which brought movies.
Did the women wear saris to those? Did you wear a sari growing up at all?
Only on holidays and birthday parties and special occasions.
Ray and I just got back from India where I gave a talk on gay issues, which was pretty exciting. But the saris were extraordinarily beautiful.
It's amazing.
India is an amazing. It's an amazing country.
Yeah.
Who influenced your growing up? Who influenced your passion for justice?
I attribute it a lot to the experience of being an immigrant and coming into another culture. And so you have your, what you know as a child, and what I knew was New Delhi and Chandigarh and India and my extended family. And of course the poverty and the kind of disparity in India is just, you can't escape it.
You can't escape it, right.
And then you come here into this extraordinarily comfortable world. And I also moved here in 1966 with my family at the sort of height of the civil rights protests, the anti-war protests, in the late 60s, the emergence of the women's movement.
Grey Panthers.
All of it happened. That churn was happening in the press. And so, and on TV. And in those days, you really had like 5 TV stations, so you had to watch what and everybody was kind of, you didn't have a million channels that you could self-select. And so everybody was kind
Chef
of
Huntley or
watching the same thing and affected by the same images. And I feel that those two experiences of being an outsider in another culture, but also then identifying so strongly with all these other outsiders who were agitating for their rights and their freedom and against the old order, was something that really connected with me.
Did you identify as blue collar?
I identified as working class.
Working
middle
class? Okay, middle
My
class.
parents identified as middle class.
As middle class.
But they're...
And they were by
yeah,
Indian standards,
they
certainly.
were. And, but we were never... I mean, I really got a class education when I went to Vassar College.
And did you go to Vassar on a scholarship?
Yep, scholarship.
Based
and
on
loans.
academics?
In the old days, you could get really low interest loans.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and I paid off all my loans, and then of course my parents contributed what they, which was significant for them because my dad was on a low professor's salary.
When did you come out as a lesbian? When did you self-identify?
I self-identified, I would say, in like the late 70s, just before I graduated, really. I thought I was bisexual in college, and I had boyfriend and I had girlfriends, and then I really would say I self-identified when I fell in love for the first time, which was with a woman, and it all kind of came together.
Was that
the
in
sexual,
college?
The spiritual, late in college.
So you were a junior or senior? And what happened? What was that? So describe what it was like to self-identify at Vassar.
Well, it was I was in college from 75 to 79.
Okay.
And that was sort of the eruption of radical feminism.
You're very smart. I graduated in 70s, and I'm 10 years older, so you went through school faster than I did. You skipped some grades.
I skipped senior year of high school.
Yeah.
I went to college, I was 16.
You were 16 when you went
for
to
a month.
college.
And then I turned 17 in October in
Yeah.
my freshman year. And yeah, so I was young and quite innocent in a lot of ways and unformed in a lot of ways, but intellectually I was very strong because both my parents encouraged total intellectual pursuits at home. Reading, was what we did.
How many brothers and sisters?
I have two older sisters.
And were they as academically successful as you?
Oh yeah, they're brilliant.
And
one's a lawyer and one's a college professor.
Are they as the whole family as politically attuned as you are?
Yeah, but I wouldn't say that they're all equally politically active. I think my parents, idea was always that you paid attention to the world, but like many immigrants, they were scared of active engagement in politics. It was always, don't do that, you'll lose your green card. And we can't, but we always read the newspaper, we always watched the news together as a family, we argued about politics, there was always an opinion, and it was fine to have a different opinion than they had. That wasn't ever,
an issue.
We had to believe what they believed.
How long do you live on a green card when your family came over and you had to be cautious because don't screw it
You
up?
can live on a green card forever, And
it can be taken away?
Mm-hmm. It can, but I became a naturalized citizen when I turned 18.
Okay. That happens automatically, or you
No,
applied
you
for
have
that?
to. You have to take a test. You have to, go and do that. And I did that when I was in college.
Your sisters did the same?
Yeah.
Okay. So you came out to yourself as a junior or senior. Did you come out to your folks right away?
I came out to them in about a year after I came out to myself, I would say. Well, a couple of years after. What happened was I graduated from college and I moved to Boston with my best friend in college. Truly a best friend. And we were both feminists, and Boston had this reputation in the 70s for being a hotbed of the feminist movement. And so we wanted to go join the movement.
So you identified first as feminist?
Yeah.
And second as lesbian?
Yeah.
That's not uncommon, is it?
No, it wasn't. I mean, that's what I started to say. In 75 to 79 was the heyday of the emergence of feminism, and what changed my life was reading books like The Second Sex by Simone de Beauvoir, The Dialectic of Sex by Shulamith Firestone, Juliet Mitchell, Women's Consciousness, Man's World. I mean, these were brilliant scholars and intellectuals sort of dissecting women's role in society, historically and presently. And it was like a big light bulb went off in all of our heads. I mean, it was so revealing and of the structure of power and of what we were seeing in the world, of what, quote, patriarchy meant, and it was really that the system of female subordination and male domination needed to be changed as much as all these other systems that we were trying to challenge and question. So women's liberation, as it was called then, and the consciousness-raising groups that I joined, and all of, as a student, and
nurtured
the kind
your
of
identity.
productions that we did. We organized tons of workshops and conferences and events when we were on campus that brought in amazing people and exposed me to even more ideas. Because Vassar was near New York, so you could easily bring up somebody on the train to speak for no money. And we got connected to all these grassroots feminist projects, and I remember meeting, people reading about the Combahee River Collective, these black, feminists and lesbians in Boston who had organized and written this manifesto in the late 70s, and we brought one of the women, to speak on campus. And so it was like, wow. And so Boston was very much in my consciousness. And I was also, aware of the gay movement. At that time in the 70s, the National Gay Task Force was sort of the organization. Gay Rights National Lobby had also started, but it was much smaller in the late 70s. And NGTF had these people like Bruce Voller and
Gene
O'Leary and Lucia Valeska. And I'll never forget, one of my housemates when I moved to Boston was a member of NGTF. She actually was a card-carrying member. And I said, my God, that is so old-fashioned. That organization has no relevance. We were like, they seemed so detached because they were working in Washington or at this national level when we were trying to live as gay people locally. It seemed very disconnected, so I used to make fun of her. And the irony is, of course, I ended up working there, and she made fun of me.
So how did that, first of all, the folks, when you came out, was that an issue for them at all?
For my parents, it was hard for them, although my father said he always thought so. And my mother said things like, you've lost your mind, you've adopted the worst of Western civilization.
So they saw it as a choice or she saw it as a choice rather than an orientation.
Well, I don't think that was the issue so much as it was that I was going in a direction that worried them.
Okay.
That they worried that I would be without a family, without support, isolated, shunned.
Were they welcoming of your first partner?
No.
No.
It took them years. I mean, they were never the kind of parents who said, get out of my house.
Right.
It was like, you're our daughter, we love you no matter what. So I had that baseline, always. But they didn't really want to engage or talk about it or get involved in my life. And I feel it took them at least 10 to 12 years. And I said to them, I'm telling you because I'm getting more and more involved in the gay movement. And I don't want you to read about the fact that I'm gay or a lesbian, but I'm going to be active in the movement. And I was. And I plunged into LGBT activism in Boston when we met.
Yes.
Getting involved in everything. I mean, I got involved in gay community news. I worked on a project to deal with violence against gay people.
You started the Boston Lesbian Gay Political Alliance.
We started LAGMA, this little group that nobody remembers, Lesbian and Gay Media Advocates.
I remember that.
We wrote a little book about how it was pre-GLAAD.
And it was, then it was also, then it was pre the Gay Journalist Association too.
Absolutely.
So what's the best way to write about these issues?
Yeah, how do you engage with the media as a gay activist?
Yeah.
We wrote up our things. It was
so
really
that's why
fun.
this is
Boston
had a portrait in pride. This is.
Well, Boston had a really amazing community.
It did.
Of people.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't believe
bigger
the
than
people
I think
met.
anywhere. Yeah.
I could not believe the writers, the smart people, just all sorts of talented folks.
Can I? When you went to NGLTF, did you feel that you were leaving behind? Not that there weren't smart people there, but you were surrounded by people who shared your intellectual passions. Mm-hmm. NGLTF was not really an intellectual organization; it was more of a workhorse, and on the left end of the spectrum in terms of its positions. Mm-hmm. Did you feel a little lonely at all? That you didn't have the same intellectual stimulation? And second question, how did your folks feel about you taking on this job as opposed to, my father always said, why didn't you make this gay thing your avocation and then contribute money to the gay community?
Well, for years my dad used to always say, you're throwing away your legal education and you can make a lasting difference by writing and by working in government or changing laws in a different way than you can by working in these organizations. He never understood organizing until I think they read my book, Virtual Equality, which sort of is a political analysis of the LGBT movement and talked a lot about the different places that I had been. And both of them read it, and it really gave them a clear insight of what I used to mean when I said the movement, or where the value of organizations. And plus they loved that I'd written a book, because my dad really believes in the power of words to change the world.
So that changed it for them.
Well, that helped.
Yes.
But I also think that, the gay movement and the movement has just been increasingly in the news. And they, like all of America, have been educated about what the challenges are that gay people face and how irrational and crazy the opposition is to full acceptance. And I think those processes of their own evolution and thinking really mirrored the country's evolution and thinking.
Did they hear you speak in Washington at the 1993
They've
march?
seen the videos.
They've seen the videos?
Yeah. And they're thrilled. And whenever I'm in the media, or they're very proud.
Are they?
Of course.
Yes. Now your partner is comedian Kate Clinton. Mm-hmm. You guys are one of the power lesbian couples. Well, you are. I mean.
Well, we didn't set out to
No,
be
of course you didn't. And you met in 1980.
It's a miracle to have a relationship. And,
well, of course you're both all over the place. She travels constantly. But your folks are welcoming of Kate Clinton into the family, and see her as daughter, and see that yours is a family.
Very
come
much
to the
so.
point of recognizing it.
Oh,
Great.
Yeah, they're completely. They love Kate. I mean, and she's a very lovable person.
She is a lovable person.
And I think they trust her. They trust that she's got my best interests, and so that really.
And that she loves you.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
So they're relaxing with that.
So they're totally happy that
Their
I
daughter
have somebody
is happy.
in my life.
Right. Your book. Is your book all that different in terms of what you said at the march?
Yeah, it is. I mean, my book was a bigger scope of the book. In the book, I was trying to do 2 or 3 things. One was I was trying to make to show that the LGBT movement's efforts had really been not just at this kind of high, rarefied policy level, but that they involved a movement. And I think I wanted to give visibility to the movement. And I did that in different ways, in different chapters, talking about it historically, but then talking about some of the dilemmas that the movement faced, the dilemma of raising money, the dilemma of dealing with religion, the dilemma of race, and how we handle that in our movement and the different tensions that arise. So that was one thing I was trying to do. The second thing I was trying to do was to make an argument that mainstreaming ourselves into the existing order was only going to get us what I called virtual equality, a simulation of real equality. But that the real equality, which I described as full moral acceptance of the moral equality of gay people, not just the political and civil equality of gay people, that acceptance required a real transformation of the existing order, and not just the integration into something that we found before. In other words, I still believe this, we can't just say that we want to, create a place for ourselves at the table of power. I think we have to rebuild the table of power so that all sorts of people have access, so that the way powerless people, outsiders, engage with power is different. I'm an idealist.
Yes.
I really believe that. I think one of the most amazing experiences that gay people have is that we are such outsiders to all sorts of institutions. We've been put outside the family, we've been put outside
the church.
The church, we've been put outside of government, we've been put outside of community. And so we have this experience of not belonging.
Except in the workplace. The workplace is the one place that I think, and that's my area. It's the one place where it's very clearly recognized that if you do not incorporate the skills and the insights of gay people, you're going to lose money and talent. And that's not something that's thought about in any other area. And the workplace, I think, is really doing an end run around the courts. They were the first to recognize gay relationships.
Without question.
Yeah.
But I think that the workplace is able to do that because in the workplace we can demonstrate our value.
Yes.
And in the church or in the family, we still are at a place where people don't value us.
Well,
I mean, even today,
we've demonstrated our value in the church. I mean, the gay men in the church have have given it its art.
Yeah.
It's just whether or not it's recognized that they're the ones who did it.
But I think that the family remains one of our key obstacles.
Yes.
Familial homophobia is still as prevalent today as it was when we were coming up.
What do you mean when you say familial homophobia?
I mean the kind of explicit rejection of gayness by heterosexual families. I mean the continuing don't bring your partner home.
Right,
I mean
right.
the continuing avoidance
Do you see a
of
change
our
in that?
lives. Absolutely, there's
Yeah,
been a change.
yeah.
You know, come on.
Pretty remarkable for our lifetime.
Huge change.
Yeah, yeah.
But Brian, the truth is that family homophobia is something that every gay person has lived through, and still, I lived through it.
Right,
You lived through
right.
it, and I still meet young people who are experiencing it. So I think we need to continue to challenge our straight friends and family members to be much more assertive in contesting that within families. I'll give you an example. I mean, my nephew came out last year in high school as a senior, and he's now in college at Stanford. My sister and brother-in-law have been fantastic. And I said to him, they better be fantastic. I mean,
Right,
come on.
right.
But they are. They genuinely do not have the homophobic baggage that my parents had to work through. And they genuinely...
No grieving
And
of
he-
lost expectations.
And what's interesting is to hear him describe his fellow gay people at Stanford University, okay? And he says he is rare in how accepting his parents are. It's rare that a lot of his fellow students are still engaging with and struggling with their families. He has a friend whose parents sent her to a reparative therapy summer camp this summer.
It's shocking
so-
that somebody that still exists.
You know, it does exist, and I think that as advanced as we are, as many advances as we're making politically, and we are, and legally, we still have this family homophobia to contend with.
This is where you tell us. First of all, thanks,
Oh.
Beth. This is where you need your glasses.
Yeah, I do.
That's all right. This is where you tell us.
Reading glasses.
That's all right. We're getting older. Where we're supposed to go, what we're supposed to do. This is at the end of the march.
Well, this was in 1993 at the March on Washington, and that's kind of amazing that it's still
It's still completely relevant.
Relevant?
Completely.
To defeat the right politically, my friends, is our challenge when we leave this march. How can we do it? We've got to march from Washington into action at home. I challenge every one of you, straight or gay, who can hear my voice, to join the National Gay and Lesbian Movement. I challenge you to join NGLTF to fight the right. We have got to match the power of the Christian supremacists, member for member, vote for vote, dollar for dollar. I challenge each of you not just to buy a T-shirt, but get involved in your movement. Get involved, volunteer. Every local organization in this country needs you. Every clinic, every hotline, every youth program needs you, needs your time and your love. And I also challenge our straight liberal allies, liberals and libertarians, independent and conservative, Republican or radical. I challenge and invite you to open your eyes and embrace us without fear. The gay rights movement is not a party. It is not a lifestyle. It is not a hairstyle. It is not a fad or a fringe or a sickness. It is not about sin or salvation. The gay rights movement is an integral part of the American promise of freedom. We, you and I, each of us, we are the descendants of a proud tradition of people asserting our dignity. It is fitting that the Holocaust Museum was dedicated the same weekend as this march, for not only were gay people persecuted by the Nazi state, but gay people are indebted to the struggle of the Jewish people against bigotry and intolerance. It is fitting that the NAACP marches with us, that feminist leaders march with us, because we are indebted to those movements. When all of us who believe in freedom and diversity see this gathering, we see beauty and power. When our enemies see this gathering, they see the millennium. Well, perhaps the right is right about something. We call for the end of the world as we know it. We call for the end of racism and sexism and bigotry as we know it. For the end of violence and discrimination and homophobia as we know it. For the end of sexism as we know it. We stand for freedom as we have yet to know it, and we will not be denied.
That was really good, and it's still so relevant.
Thanks.
Last question before I think we're going to run out of time, which kills me because I have 1,000 more. Do Librans ever relax? Are you?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't mean.
Great.
No. I mean.
hanger-outer.
I know that, but have you found your bliss? Have you? Where do you think? Where have you worked? What have you done that has been most satisfying to you?
Well, I always say that the movement for me is not about a job, it's a life sentence.
It is.
And for me, that life sentence is a blessing. I mean, I love working in social justice work, and I find it creative, endlessly stimulating, frustrating, of course, but the people you meet, the power of the successes that you have just keeps you going. So I have found a lot of happiness in my life. I've been able to make a life as a lesbian activist, which, that's why I went to law school. I thought I needed a job. I couldn't support myself as a lesbian activist.
Yes, not many people can do that. A lot of people say, I want to do what you do, but making a living doing it is not as easy as they
It's not
might
easy,
think.
but I feel like we all, we had this spirit of just doing it. And that's why our movement is still vital.
That's right.
It is not a paid movement.
Right.
All over this country and the world, the people who are fighting for rights and for social justice are doing it because they feel it and they want it.
And the reward is in the doing it.
It is.
Right. So where do you go from here?
I am going to write a book. I'm going to continue.
What's the book?
It's called Against Tradition. And I want to make I want to look at the relationship between social justice movements and the idea of tradition. And so it's philosophical, but it's going to be practical because I'm very practical. So I'll do that for a while, and then I'm going to continue to organize. In which place or format, I don't yet know. But, I look forward to the journey.
You are you are so smart. No wonder we don't hang out as much as I'd like to. You're too smart.
Get out of
here.
here.
I'd be,
I love
asking.
T-dance.
I'd love Kate. I'd say,
Go
Kate, what does
dancing.
she mean? Urvashi, Vaid, thank you for your extraordinary contributions to our lives.
Thanks,
and,
Brian.
Thank you all for tuning in. I'm Brian McNutt. Good night.
Gotta have pride. Been around too long to keep